Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for October 30th through November 5th of 2023. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here. And this week, I don't know how exactly to phrase this week. Typically, the week has a certain theme that I like to make for the title and for the thumbnail. But this week, I think has a mixture of like unexpected truths, like a little bit more of what we experienced last week. However, there is a feeling of things finally moving forward by the time we get to the end of the week. So let's go ahead and get started. As well, I'm still running a discount on my consultations. If you're looking to get a consultation from me to get a update on what 2024 is going to be like, make sure you use the code 2024. If you are a new client, if you are a past client, you guys already receive a discount and you already have a code. You guys get an extra, I think it was 10% off. And then the new clients get 15% off. Anyway, if you're a new client, 2024, you're going to get 15% off. And the new clients, you guys are already getting a discount, but you're getting an extra discount on top of that. I can't remember the percentage. I think it was like 10%. Anyway, that discount is lasting up into the end of this week. So this is the last week that you guys can get it. So make sure to get the consultation if you guys are wanting to know what's going to be going on for you in 2024. So we start this week off on Monday with the moon just ingressing into Gemini and immediately making a square to Saturn. And that's pretty much the only transit that we have going on Monday. And again, what's nice about this is now we're out of eclipse season. I think one of the best things to understand about eclipse season is while everything feels intense and everything feels like it's an emergency situation, you don't always have to make a rash decision based off of, a reaction. Like you want to respond and not react. And I think now that we get into Monday and the moon ingresses into Gemini, we're now officially out of eclipse season. There's an argument you can make that like leaving eclipse season doesn't happen till the next lunation. However, we're pretty much out of the weeds at this point. As the moon ingresses into Gemini, there is this, emotional connection to information, to communication. The moon in Gemini is very curious. It's very expressive of its emotions. But as it makes a square to Saturn, there's still this, wall. There's still this uncertainty or this not knowing what exactly the truth is. The moon in Gemini is someone asking like a very standard, like on the surface question, but Saturn in Pisces is like an old monk teacher or something like that, where it's like, they answer, like they speak in like, I keep thinking of Tim Dillon talking about Kamala Harris and how she speaks in gypsy curses, but it's almost like you're not going to get the full answer. It reminds me of the Karate Kid where, he's like, why do I have to do all this stuff? Like the wax on, wax off. And I don't remember what he says, but it says something along the lines of like, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. That's what reminds me of this moon in Gemini squaring Saturn is you might have a question or you might be curious or you might communicate something that is on the like very surfacey, and that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but the truth is a lot deeper than that. You're not necessarily going to understand the reason why or understand the meaning of it all. That's for time to play itself out with that and for you to get that answer eventually as time goes on. But the moon making that square to Saturn is kind of like a hard stop. It is kind of a hard wall. And if you think about the moon, it rules our emotions, it rules our body, it rules like the connection to everything that we're sensitive to. We're going to be sensitive to communication, to information. As it squares Saturn, it's like we may not understand what the full truth is. We may not understand exactly where to go next. And it's one of those things where you have to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers. And I feel like a lot of Monday is not knowing what the right question is. And I think that's okay. It's just like, I think on Monday morning, there's a level of confusion that hits that the rest of Monday after the moon separates from Saturn is about just sitting on and baking in those questions. We then move on to Tuesday. And on Tuesday, the moon's still going to be hanging out in Gemini. It's not going to be doing much, but we do have a highlight of the week, and that's Venus making a trine to Uranus. Venus is still in her sign of fall in Virgo. If Venus is about fun and pleasure, relationships, connections, indulgence, she's in her sign of fall where there's something uncomfortable about it, right? What Venus in Virgo is good at doing is like enjoying things that typically aren't necessarily like quote unquote enjoyable. It's like very like enjoying admin tasks. And as Venus trines Uranus, there's some sort of, like a baseline interpretation of that is it's some sort of liberation or freedom or innovation around pleasure and fun. My only thing is, while Venus is in Virgo, something that we saw during the COVID times with Venus in Virgo trining Uranus was like weird, wacky fashion things that were like protective masks or something along those lines. I remember seeing that, like, I think in 2020 when Venus was in Virgo trining Uranus, it was like there was like some fashion mask that came out that was kind of popular online for like 5 seconds. That's very Venus, trine Uranus, like Venus and Virgo. Like, let me make my, COVID mask something super, super cool in fashion and trendy. That's Venus type stuff, right? But Venus trining Uranus is at least, being innovative, it is at least having some sort of an idea, some sort of a random thing that happens that is more fun, like an unlocking of joy, an unlocking of pleasure. But it's Venus and Virgo. It's not going to be through these stereotypical, avenues of pleasure or fun. Venus and Virgo is like when you get into the nitty gritty, or for example, I always make the analogy of thrifting with Venus and Virgo. It's like, hey, you might go to the thrift store. In fact, actually, Venus trining Uranus might be, if any of you like go thrifting, like go thrifting with Venus trining Uranus. I'd be curious what you guys might find. There might be some like cool, weird thing that you find that like, oh, this works perfectly with this outfit. Or again, maybe you're an artist or you're a creative, or same thing with relationships. Like this allows for some sort of innovation, some sort of freedom when it comes to pleasure and fun and connection. It's Venus and Virgo. It may not be the best situation ever, or it's like not a stereotypical way of creating pleasure, but it is something fun. It is something enjoyable. And this is a trine to Uranus. So these are the two planets working closely together. And so I really like Tuesday's Venus trine Uranus. I think it is something fun. I think it is something that is uplifting. And I think we need that given now that we're getting out of eclipse season and still everything's in Scorpio. So Wednesday, we have quite a few moon transits. On Wednesday, the moon will be making a square to Venus, and then it will square Neptune. So the moon squaring Venus in Gemini is kind of like, do you ever get excited about something? Like maybe you bought, again, like you went thrifting, you bought this, outfit or something like that. Or you did something cool and you like talked to a friend and they're like, oh, that's weird. Like, oh, I don't really like that. And you're like, oh, maybe this isn't cool. Or it's like you ask someone their opinion and then it throws you off the rails and then you start questioning everything. That's what the moon in Gemini reminds me of when it's squaring Venus and Virgo and then immediately squares Neptune, where it's like, oh, I thought this was it, but now I have new information and now I'm uncertain. So I think the moon squaring Venus is kind of like where we want to emotionally connect, where we want to communicate and conversate. There's something not lining up here. It's kind of like you want to share something you're excited about with someone, but they're not really into it. And then after the moon squares Venus, it then squares Neptune, where you're like left in confusion, or you're left in a cloud of uncertainty. So I think the moon on Wednesday is just kind of like, again, maybe not asking too many questions, but not necessarily getting the feedback that you are expecting. And it kind of leaves you with more questions and not necessarily any more answers, or the answers that you do get just lead you to more questions. So the first part of Wednesday just seems a little bit confusing, a little bit frustrating, like not actually being able to enjoy the thing that you want to enjoy. But then as we get to the later part of Wednesday, the moon will ingress into Cancer and trine Saturn. So I don't know. I love the idea that the moon just shifts signs every 2.5-3 days. It's kind of like, cool, we get some attention and energy here, then we get some attention and energy here, and so on and so forth. When the moon ingresses into Cancer, it's now going into its home sign. Now the more, focus is going to be on protecting, securing, feeling nourished, feeling safe, feeling warm, feeling comforted. And as the moon goes into Cancer and we are being a little bit more like, hey, what do I need to take care of? What do I need to feel safe? What is a absolute necessity to do? It will be making a trine to Saturn, where the thing is Saturn is about to station direct this week. That's one of the major highlights that we have. But as the moon goes into Cancer and connects to Saturn, there is I know what needs to be done here. I will talk more about Saturn stationing direct when we actually get to the day, and that's not till Saturday. But as Saturn is pretty much motionless here, we're in this pivot point. Saturn being direct is saying, like, here's your new responsibilities. Here are your new tasks. Here's now what you are responsible for. Here are your new limitations that you have to just deal with. Here are your new circumstances. When Saturn stations retrograde, it is that period of accepting those, dealing with it, learning the ropes. And then as Saturn stations direct and moves forward, there is this kind of like, again, the analogy I always use, it's like when you first start a job and you're getting training on the job. It's like, okay, here's your new tasks, here's your new duties, and you're getting trained by someone. Saturn going retrograde is, okay, you're no longer being trained by someone, but you're still fresh to the job. So you're learning things on your own. You're understanding how to take on that responsibility and how to manage those tasks better. And then there's a certain point in your new job where maybe it's, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, where you just get comfortable with these new tasks and responsibilities. It's like second nature because you've, learned how to take them on. That's Saturn stationing direct after the retrograde. Now, we're not there yet, but we are getting ready for that energy to start moving forward. And I think as the moon in Cancer trine Saturn, it's like, okay, I understand what I have to take care of. I understand what is a necessity. I understand who I have to be, and more emotionally and internally, how I have to discipline myself, how I have to be more mature in order to handle these things. So the first part of Wednesday is like kind of confusing and maybe a little frustrating, but the second part of Wednesday is like, okay, I know what I have to do, and I need to get more tapped into my emotions and understand the strength and resiliency that I have here in order to move forward with these, responsibilities and tasks. So then we get to Thursday, and on Thursday, the moon, while it's in Cancer, is going to be making a sextile to Jupiter, and it will be making a trine to Mars. So I like this because the moon making a sextile to Jupiter, again, Jupiter's in Taurus, the slow growth, things take time. Jupiter is retrograde. So it's like, again, we're not necessarily seeing the fruit blossom or the flowers blossom off the plants right now. But the moon in Cancer making that sextile to Jupiter is watering the plants, taking care of the plants. Sure, you may not be seeing the flowers or the fruit or the vegetables grow yet. However, it's just like a good thing of watering your plants. And sometimes, I look at like farming, especially with like the moon making a trine to Mars, where Mars is in Scorpio and, our energy is really intense. We might be a little bit more combative than usual. We might be a little bit more just on edge than usual. And the moon sextiling Jupiter and making that trine to Mars is like, okay, I have something that can give me some patience. I have something that I can do that can, it's kind of like slowly investing. It's like, well, you look at the stock market and you're like, let me bet on the stock market. Let me just throw all my money in the S&P. Or it's like, you don't always have to do that. You don't have to take out your money the second you think the stock market's going to go down. There's this energy on Thursday of like, hey, be patient with things. It takes time for things to grow. And you can use that patience and understanding what the long game is in order to fuel the Mars and Scorpio energy. Because Mars and Scorpio feels like it needs like something to fixate on. It needs something for the tunnel vision. And sometimes that can look like fear and reaction. But I think as the moon's in Cancer trining Mars, it's like, no, I know what I do. I know what I need to do to take care of myself. And I don't need to react to everything right now. But I do know what I can do that's going to take some, it's like one of those things where it's like when you're really angry or you're really upset, rather than reacting off something, it's like, do something with your hands. Water your garden, focus. I know it's like October, November, so that's probably not happening, but doing something that is going to be better for you in the long run, that Jupiter and Taurus stuff, and that's going to allow you to navigate that Mars and Scorpio energy a little bit better of like, all right, now that I'm a little bit more calmed down, I know where my action needs to be focused on. I know what rail system I'm on. I know what I have tunnel vision for, and it doesn't need to be like, again, reactionary or aggression. It can just be like, I want to focus on this, and the moon in Cancer making that trine to Mars is like feeling safe with focusing on something. I've recommended this book before, but there's a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And that's what this moon in Cancer sextiling Jupiter trining Mars reminds me of. It's like sometimes you just need to go hide away in the mountains and focus deeply on work and not have any outside distractions. That's how I look at this moon transit on Thursday. But the other transit, the other highlight that we have on Thursday is going to be the sun going opposite Jupiter. What I like about the sun opposite Jupiter is it's like realizations of truths. Like the sun is in Scorpio where, and I've made this analogy before, like when you look at a city or you look at, even like something like farming, it's like you see all of these beautiful things on the surface, but like deep down, it's a lot of dirty work. And I think the sun going opposite Jupiter is understanding it's like, in order for a tree to grow as big as it can or as tall as it can and have as many fruits as it can, like you have to work on the roots first. And that's what I've been thinking a little bit more about this. And I forgot I think I was listening to Alex Hormozy about this. Like right now, the season is we need our roots to be deeper in order for these trees to grow up. You have to remember Jupiter's still retrograde. And Jupiter will station direct at the beginning of 2024, and it will fly forward until it enters Gemini in like June. And we have a lot of awesome Jupiter transits as we get into 2024. The beginning of 2024, like first and second quarter of 2024 is when we're going to be seeing the leaves come out, the fruit come out, and all of our hard work be rewarded. Right now, we have to make sure our roots are as deep and as strong as they can be. And that's how I look at the sun opposite Jupiter, where it's like, there might be some tension here, and when I say tension, it's kind of like, oh, why aren't things growing? Or, why isn't this going faster? But I think it's a good day to really take a peek at like, hey, maybe the reason your, garden isn't growing as well as it can be is because the soil sucks. What are you putting nutrients in the soil? Is the biodiversity, conducive of growth? Is it going to help that plant? Do you have other things that you can do to make these roots stronger so where you grow a very healthy plant? And so I think the sun opposite Jupiter is just like making that connection, saying like, okay, now like I understand the value of the roots, and now I'm in a season of focusing on planting these roots and making them really strong. So when we get to the first half of next year, we do grow a strong plant. We do grow a strong tree. Then as we get to Friday, we have a lot of lunar transits going on. The moon, while it's in Cancer, will make a trine to Mercury. It will then sextile Uranus. It will then trine Neptune. It will then sextile Venus, and then go opposite Pluto. Long story short, it just sounds like a lot of like, connections are being made here mentally and emotionally. Moon trining Mercury is again, just like understanding the necessity. Like Mercury in Scorpio likes to like really focus on like, again, tunnel vision, but Mars in Scorpio is more of like action is directed in a tunnel vision, very like hyper fixated way. Mercury in Scorpio is like our mental and our, not our emotional, but our mental and our logical tracks are, again, focused on a hyper-fixated way. The moon making a trine to that is like understanding the necessity of that. Now, there's times where Mercury and Scorpio can be good, and there's times where Mercury and Scorpio can be bad. This is the whole thing with astrology. It's like everything can be harmful and helpful depending on the context of you use it for. This is why I get so frustrated when people are like, oh, my chart is really bad, or, my chart sucks. It's like, well, in certain contexts, yes, it does suck. But in other contexts, it's amazing. It's great. It's just depending on like how harmful or helpful is it given the situation. And so the moon trining Mercury is like making that emotional connection of like, oh, I understand the necessity of having to hyper focus here. I understand the necessity of really digging down and like being critical and saying like, it's kind of like looking under the hood. Your car can't run well if the oil isn't changed. You don't have a clean oil filter. What's your transmission fluid? Like, is the timing correct? All of that kind of good stuff. The moon trining Mercury is at least making that emotional, mental connection of saying, I have to focus on this, and it's okay to focus on it. And I feel like sometimes you ever get overwhelmed with something because you don't actually know about it. It's like we have these things as humans where it's like when we have like an ignorance around a situation, we want to avoid it because like, heaven forbid, we don't know something. I feel like that could be what's kind of going on in the general cloud of this current time. And I think as the moon makes that trine to Mercury, it's like, okay, we're allowing ourselves that emotional and mental connection to say like, all right, maybe I am ignorant about this, but now I need to know what this is. Now I need to focus on this because my car is making noises. My check engine light went on. Like, what's going on with my car? Then the moon will sextile Uranus. Again, some sort of a, solution, some sort of a random event that happens that works things out really well. The moon will make a trine to Neptune, where the moon trining Neptune is kind of like, again, everything's kind of rosy. Everything's kind of in an ideal situation, which I think is good. But then the moon will sextile Venus. Like, I mean, I really like this moon trine Neptune situation because it's like, again, trine Mercury, sextile Uranus, trine Neptune, sextile Venus. It's like all of these like little pieces kind of come together where all of a sudden there's a lot of better like mind body connection, like emotional like mind connection where it's like, oh, now that I can focus on this is going to work out. Now all of a sudden my car is driving better. All I needed to do was change the oil. All I needed to do was, change the windshield wipers or whatever. And then it goes opposite Pluto after it makes that sextile to Venus. And again, the sextile Venus part I think is like just a nice little touch. But then the moon goes opposite Pluto and there's kind of tension here. Where it's like, the way I've always liked to refer to the moon in Cancer opposite Pluto and Capricorn is like, you have to take care of things no matter what. Like, no matter how high inflation gets, no matter how high housing gets, guess what? You still got to eat. You still got to live somewhere. And there can be this frustration with, the economic situations. And like I said before, what's really funny is like a couple of months ago, I made a comment about Pluto is at the end degrees of Capricorn and like every institution is corrupted. And a lot of people are like, no, it's not. And then like, I think I said it last week. Everyone's like, yes, it is. So funny how that works out. And the moon in Cancer opposite Pluto and Capricorn is like, sure, every institution might be corrupted. Sure, there might be a lot of just power struggles going on with, again, like the Capricorn system, whether that's corporations, whether that's governments, whether that's any sort of institution. However, you still have to take care of things that you need to take care of. How can you do that? How can you circumnavigate the system to where it works out for you? And not all of that's going to be super easy. It's not like the system is built. It's not like here in America, everything is designed for everything to work out in your best favor. No, there's many other interests that are more important than your livelihood. However, you still have to do that. And that might have to, you might have to battle. And when I say battle, I mean, like look the horse in the mouth, look the situation in the face for what it is and say, okay, if this is the situation, how can I still get my needs met without having to rely on this system? Again, maybe that could look like couponing. That can look like finding deals. That can look like, well, and again, the other way I look at it too is the moon doing all of this stuff and going opposite Pluto. It's like maybe you're in the market for a new car, but new car prices are expensive, and maybe it'd be worth your while to just like fix your car and spend the money on that and make it last longer. And that might give you like a sense of empowered feeling with like the moon in Cancer opposite Pluto. So it's like the moon does all this cool stuff and then it goes opposite Pluto where there's a little bit of like facing fear stuff. But the other highlight that we have on Friday is Venus will go opposite Neptune. I love this and I hate this at the same time. And I say hate very lightly. Like, I don't think it's the worst thing ever. Why I love Venus opposite Neptune is it's just Venus making a connection to Neptune. Venus is, again, love, connection, indulgence, fun, romance. With making a connection to Neptune is there's some sort of mystical, illusory, delusional, and again, like I like saying like delulu for people because it's a trending word, but sometimes it's fun to be delusional. Sometimes it's fun to be, obsessed and, carefree and idealizing a situation, especially when it comes to love and romance. I'm a moon in Libra. Shit's fun. However, Venus is fallen and it's opposite Neptune, where it's one of those things where you might feel like an insecurity about a relationship or something that's fun or pleasurable. And with it opposite Neptune, it's kind of like, are you like when I say gassing yourself up, are you like thinking about a situation in a delusional way that isn't actually true? Like you might be basing a opinion or basing a realization of a situation off of little tidbits of truth and then creating a story or a narrative that may not necessarily be the truth. And so I think as Venus goes opposite Neptune, there's this kind of like, I want to enjoy this. However, I'm not even sure what's going on. Like this is a Mexican standoff between Venus and Neptune where it's like Venus and Virgo is like, I'm trying to get everything perfect. I'm trying to get everything just right. And I can't. And it's what can I get right? And Neptune going opposite is like, oh, you don't know. Oh, there's this cloud of confusion. Is this like, 1 second you're romanticizing everything and everything is, rose-colored glasses. And the next minute it's like, you've been duped. It's delusional. Like you don't really know. So there's this kind of like tension of like uncertainty with Venus going opposite Neptune. And I think if there's a fun part of it for you that's going on Friday, enjoy it. But if it starts getting overwhelming or you start, getting too confused, it's like, hey, it's okay to take a step back and be like, hey, I can enjoy this for what it is, but I can't let it, dictate everything that I do. Like the best thing ever in your heart and in your emotions may not actually be the best thing ever. You can enjoy it for what it is, but don't like imprint it into your brain and, ride on that high, because if you ride on that high, well, then if it comes crashing down, it's going to be really disappointing versus if you're like, oh, this feels nice, but I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. You can have a little bit of a safe zone of like, oh, well, if that doesn't turn out to be what it is, you're like, cool, that maybe I was, right in terms of seeing that maybe that wasn't the real case here. So Venus opposite Neptune is really interesting. And then we get to Saturday. And on Saturday is when we're going to be having the moon ingress into Leo. And throughout the whole day, it will be squaring Jupiter. It won't make that exact square to Jupiter till late in the evening. But what's nice about the moon in Leo is like, sun's in Scorpio, moon's in Leo. Like, we're all kind of like feeling a little like confident, feeling a little edgy, feeling a little bold. And the sun in Scorpio is like, again, our willpower and, our vitality is just like at an extreme level. And the moon in Leo, our emotions are connected to, again, our vitality, our willpower, our ego, the way that we're being seen. And so there's this kind of like just being like, fuck yeah, I'm the man kind of energy with the sun in Scorpio and moon in Leo. But it will make a square to Jupiter where it's like, again, you can't rest on your laurels. You can't, like the moon making a square to Jupiter. I just heard this saying the other day where it's like, you can't drink too much. And what that saying implied was like, you can't ride your own success or ride your own highs off of everything. And so there's this kind of like feeling pompous, feeling good about stuff, but just knowing that like you could take that high for what it is, but you can't just continue with that forever and ever. The two highlights that we have on Saturday is Mercury will go opposite Uranus and Saturn stations direct. Boy, a lot of things here, in my opinion. Number one, Mercury going opposite Uranus is discovering something. Like there's a certain level of it reminds me of like finding buried treasure, like getting some sort of a map, dissecting what this map is, finding the X, digging there, and then boom, all of a sudden there's treasure. It could also be, boom, you hit a gas pipe and you blow up. But like Mercury opposite Uranus is like, we really peer down into something and you never know what you're going to find. This could be, there's so many different analogies I can think of, but there is some sort of discovery. There is some sort of an unlocking mechanism that happens with Mercury opposite Uranus. It will create instability. Again, that's why it could be this, like literally you hit your shovel on a gas pipe and go boom. Or you can hit your shovel and hit a treasure chest and go, what's that? Or maybe you hit your shovel and you hit like a unknown body casket, like some, body that dipped in acid in like a, 20 gallon barrel. It's kind of like you're just going to dig deep enough to find something. And that something is going to be very random. It might be very chaotic. It might be very fun. However, it is going to create some instability here. So on Saturday, as you're thinking, as you're communicating, expect information to kind of pop off and to kind of give you some unexpected news or create some instability. And instability isn't always bad. It's just like if you're expecting to just dig a hole and it's just going to be dirt, then like you're going to be in for a surprise because there's something more there. And that could, throw off your plans. Like, again, like if you dig and all of a sudden you find a skeleton, it's like, all right, well, you got to call the cops and they're going to set up a crime scene. And then it's like, okay, if you were digging something, let's say you're digging like a hole to plant like a tree or something like that. Well, it's going to take some time. That's, or example, if you open buried treasure, how are you going to get that treasure out? Do you put it in the bank? Like, do you have to tell somebody? That's kind of the thing that's happening here. But what is cool on Saturday is Saturn stations direct. And like I already said, I love a Saturn stationing direct and starting to move forward because it's moving forward over territory it's already been. Twice already. This will be the third time it moves over this territory. But now it's like, okay, we understand the responsibilities and the duties that come with Saturn and Pisces. Saturn entered Pisces back in March. So we're coming back over things that we started in March and have been moving forward with. And now it's like, I understand the responsibility, I understand the duty, and now it's easier. It's like when you first start a job, it does get really difficult trying to learn stuff and you feel uncomfortable. But then there's a certain point where like, this is fucking easy. Like when I first started DJing weddings, I had so much anxiety. I had so much nervousness. My first wedding was so bad. It was so bad. I almost got fired because of how much I fucked up my first wedding. But then I ended up becoming like one of the best in the fucking company. And so it's just like, once you understand the rules of the game, once you understand what your responsibilities are, there becomes more of a fluid, more just enjoyable way of doing the work. Like you find your system, you find your way of doing things. And that's what I do like about Saturn stationing direct is like, all right, now we're in the groove. And we're talking about Saturn stuff, responsibility, maturity, limitations. It's the same thing. It's like if you are in like a certain situation where there are parameters around limitations, things that you can't do, authorities that you have to work with or work around. Saturn station direct is like, I understand the rules to this now, and I understand what I can and can't do, and now I can find my niche. Now I can find my comfort zone. So I really like Saturn stationing direct on Saturday. And while we still have a Mercury retrograde next month in December, and while we still have Jupiter to station direct, this is a slow forward movement of things. This is a slow change in things finally moving forward. So then we move to Sunday. And on Sunday, a big highlight that we have is it's Parker's birthday. So everyone wish Parker a very happy birthday. She has worked very, very hard, and she has come so far in terms of editing quality. And if you really like the videos and how everything's going, make sure you wish her a happy birthday. That's the biggest highlight on Sunday. On Sunday, the only other things that we have going on is the moon. Again, while it's in Leo, is making a square to Mars. It will then square Uranus, and then it will come back and square Mercury. So the thing with moon and Leo squaring Mars and Scorpio is like, just because someone's picking a fight, like you don't have to fight back. Like, I've made these analogies before where it's like, if you're out drinking or at bars or something like that, like guys look for fights and they will say something to you to like trigger you and, hurt your ego to where like, guys like, oh, what? Like, I'm gay? No, fuck you. And it's like the moon in Leo squaring Mars, it's like, there could be attacks or confrontation that really hurts your ego and really just kind of like, triggers you, and you don't have to engage in it. Like you can just roll it off. And while you might be like, you walk away from the situation, and while you're walking away, like, fuck that guy, all that type of shit. But you don't have to engage in it, because I think as the moon, like if you engage in it, moon squaring Mars and then Uranus and Mercury is like, shit can go fucking sideways real quick. It's kind of like, have you seen the memes where it's like if someone with like puffy ears, like, don't ever try to fight someone that has puffy ears. They're going to fucking kick your ass. That's because they're fighters. And I don't know if you guys know that. But anyway, Moon making a square to Mars and Uranus is some sort of a frustration or a confrontation that will then possibly blow things up. And then the Moon will square Mercury, where it's just kind of like, well, this was all bullshit and there was no reason to do this. And now my ego's hurt. And now I'm thinking too much about like what I should or shouldn't have done. And the Moon, a more positive way of looking at this is the Moon making that square to Mars is like, again, there's a level of being upset about like where you want to be and where you actually are. And that fueling things. Like there's something about Sunday about like realizing what you need to do and where you need to go and realizing maybe you're not there. And maybe that's like the punch in the gut that you need to actually start like going forward with stuff. It's like, how late are you on your goals? How much longer are your goals going to take? Or you've been waiting to do something and take action, but you haven't. There's a level of just pissed off energy that happens on Sunday that could be a really awesome fuel for moving forward and taking action on those things. It might be abrupt action. It may not, and it may be imperfect action, but there's something about doing something on that day. And the Moon making that square to Mars is like, why am I not farther in my goals? And the Moon squaring Uranus is like, fuck it, I'm going to just go and do this and do that. And then the Moon making a square to Mercury is being frustrated with yourself of like, and again, I would caution on digging a hole to China where it's like, oh, God, woe is me. I just suck. And this is why I can't do anything. And I'm a loser and blah, 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 blah. But I think a good way of looking at the Moon in Leo making a square to Mercury is kind of like, hey, like this really matters to me and I need to take this seriously, even though I'm charged up, even though I'm a little bit pissed off. Like I've got to leave my emotions at the door and be able to execute the action. And that's this week, guys. We get to next week. And next week, we have a lot going on. We have Venus making a trine to Pluto, Mercury trining Neptune, which I'm actually kind of interested in, Venus ingressing into Libra. That's my favorite thing of next week. Venus ingressing into Libra. It's out of its sign of fall. We get Venus in its home sign. Sure, it's going to hit the south node, but it's going to be okay. Mercury ingresses into Sagittarius, where it's going to be for actually a little while because we'll have a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn and it'll go back into Sag. So we're going to be yapping all day long. Mercury will make a square to Saturn. We might just yap a little bit to where, we get the ruler on the hand and be like, shut up. And then Mars goes opposite Uranus. Again, more explosive energy, more things just kind of, becoming unraveled. And we'll be talking about all that stuff next week. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.